If you want to take advantage of the extensibility in MVC3, you'll want to write a dependency resolver. This will allow you to plug pretty much anything into the MVC runtime. A dependency resolver just has to implement the IDependencyResolver interface, which consists of two methods, getService, and you'll be passed a type parameter, or getServices, also taking a type parameter. Once you've implemented a dependency resolver, you'll want to plug it into the MVC framework by invoking DependencyResolver.setResolver. That's a static method on a class. You'll pass in a new instance of your dependency resolver. Typically, if you're going to take this approach, what you'll do inside of the dependency resolver, as I'll demonstrate, is forward these calls to an inversion of control container, or IOC container. We won't be spending a lot of time in this module talking about dependency injection and inversion of control containers. Those concepts are tightly related. If you do look around the Pluralsight library, particularly in the design patterns section, then you're going to find some discussion about dependency injection and inversion of control containers. Let's take a look at implementing the IDependencyResolver interface and then observing the component that we built to see how the MVC runtime interacts with it. The first thing I'm going to do in my project is add a library package reference, and I'm going to go out and look for Ninject, which is an inversion of control container. It's going to help us implement an IDependencyResolver. Essentially, it can do all the hard work. We've located it. I'm just going to click Install. We now have a reference to Ninject in our project, so let's build a dependency resolver. I'm going to insert a new class into the project. We'll call this the Ninject Dependency Resolver. This is going to implement the IDependencyResolver interface, and that involves two methods, getService and getServices. The reason this is going to be so easy is because we are going to be using Ninject. When someone constructs this resolver, they will need to pass in an object that implements iKernel, and that is essentially implemented by Ninject. What we'll do is save that kernel reference off into a field so that we can use it later. And now when someone calls getService, we will tell Ninject to go out and try to get this service type. Now, this particular API that we're using, tryGet, will return null if Ninject doesn't know about that service, and that's just what the dependency resolver is supposed to do in MVC3. If you do not find a service, don't throw an exception, just return null. In order to use this, we are going to have to construct a new iParameters array that is empty. We actually don't have any additional parameters to pass in. And this needs a return statement so that we actually return any objects that Ninject finds. If someone calls getServices, they're looking for multiple services of a given type, then we say Ninject, please get all of this service type. And again, we need an empty iParameter array. Let's put a breakpoint here on the getService method. And what we need to do now is register this dependency resolver with the MVC runtime so that it knows that it should use it. Let's go into the global.asax, and in application start, I will say register dependency resolver. This will just be a method that we call out to from application start. So the first thing I'll do inside of here is construct an instance of a standard kernel. This is Ninject's inversion of control container. It's where, we'll see later, it's where I register the services that my components will need, and the kernel figures out how to put those services together and build the components. But once I have the kernel, what I can say is dependency resolver dot set resolver new Ninject dependency resolver, and pass in that kernel instance. So with just those pieces in place, let's see what happens when I run the application with debugging, and we just request the home controller, which is going to render the index view. So F5 to run, and we hit our breakpoint inside of getService. If we look at service type, what is it looking for? It's looking for something that implements iController factory. we haven't registered one of those, so what the MVC runtime will see is a null return from get service, and that means it's just going to fall back on the default controller factory that is built into the runtime. But if we had a custom controller factory, all we would need to do at this point is register it with Ninject. Ninject would return our custom controller factory, and we've plugged into the MVC framework. I'm going to press F5 to continue. Now the MVC runtime is looking for something called iController Activator. This is a new component in MVC 3, where if you don't want to take the full responsibility of what a controller factory has to do, you can plug in just a controller activator. That gives you the chance to instantiate a controller and do something with it. F5 again. Notice that the MVC runtime is coming to the kernel or coming to the dependency resolver and saying, I need a home controller. It gives us a chance to put together that home controller. I'll show you why that's useful here in just a minute. F5 one more time. Now we're looking for an iViewPage activator. Now we're looking for index_CSHTML. And finally, our view has rendered and we're displaying the index view. So a very simple request, but the MVC runtime is coming to the dependency resolver multiple times to say, I need to do this, and I need a component to do this, and this, and this.